The floor gave under my boots like wet meat, because it was wet meat. That was the first thing I understood about the place, before my mind would take in any of the rest. I was inside the thing we had crossed 1,000 years of dark to find. My hand was up in front of my face. In my glove was a drive no bigger than my thumb. On it was my daughter, or what a company had scraped off her before she died. The chamber was alive. It had been alive so long that living and dying were not separate things in it anymore. The walls wept, not damp, wept. Faces were pressed into them, packed deep, strata on strata, the way an ice moon layers down when it is cored. The mouths worked, a whole slow tide of them, opening, closing. Black came out when they opened. It ran the way coolant runs from a split line on a hot drive. Over my head, the ceiling was a knot of raw nerve the size of a cargo bay. It turned in its sleep. The light bent after it. The harvester filled the rest. All of it. I looked at it, and the name came up into my mouth. On its own. God. The dead had called it that. So did I. I lifted the drive. I meant to offer her. A thing this old, this deep in the business of bodies, might know how to put a person back into one. It might trade. It might take the ship and the 100,000 asleep in her hull and hand me back one small girl. That was my whole hope. I held it up like papers at a checkpoint. It did not answer. It has no words. It reached in behind my eyes instead, easy as a hand into water, and it showed me. It had eaten her 3 crossings ago. Her fear had been sweet. She was still in there, still awake, still afraid, pinned to the outside of the hall with the rest, and it would let me hear her if I came the rest of the way in. He was rotting. That was the last hour of the crossing. The first hour, the one that started all of it, was a long way behind me, in the cold, coming up out of the tank. I woke the way we always woke, which was badly. There is no sleeping on a run like ours, not the way a person means the word. We were decanted. On the Corvain, the decanting bay was down near the keel, a long, low room that smelled of hot iron and the sour reek of the gel we floated in, and I came up out of the tank the way I always came up, coughing, tearing, my chest hauling against muscle that had gone to string in the years I was down. The gel came up with me, black and curdled, and I brought a good measure of it out of my lungs onto the deck plate and knelt there in it while the arms did their work. There were arms above the tank, steel, jointed, older than any man who had ever crewed the ship, and they came down out of the dark, and they took hold of the spike at the base of my skull, and they drew it out. I want to be plain about the spike, because it is the first thing anyone should know about how we ran, and nobody who sends a ship like ours out ever tells the men what it costs to come back up. There is a port in the back of my neck. When I go down, they seat an iron spike into it, hot, and it runs the length of my spine, and it carries the ship's care into me while I sleep, keeps the heart going at a crawl, keeps the meat from rotting off the bone. When I come up, they pull it. It comes out hot. It has been in me for years, and it comes out the temperature of a thing that has been sitting against a running engine, and the first breath I took every time I woke, I took around the pain of that. And then the voices, "Welcome back, Nathan." That was Malachi. "Welcome back. Your flesh is holding 92% compatible with what your predecessor left in the tank. We are so glad. We have found him again." The name Malachi will mislead a stranger who has never shipped on an old harvester. He will hear it and think of a calm, clean voice out of a clean white speaker, and that is not what Malachi was. Malachi was the ship's mind, and the ship's mind on a hull that old is not built. It is grown. It is grown out of the men who ran her before. When a captain dies on the Corvain, and they all die on the Corvain, the ship takes what he was, the whole map of him, everything he knew and everything he feared, and it folds him into the choir. Malachi was the word we used for all of them at once. 600 and more voices, and they did not speak in unison, not quite. They came a half beat apart, the way 100 men in a hold will all cough within the same few seconds, but never on the same one, so that everything Malachi said arrived with an edge of blur on it, a wetness, and under the words, there was always the sound of at least one of them weeping. There was always one weeping. It faded after a while. I had stopped hearing it years ago. I heard it again that first morning, and I did not know yet why. How long, I said. My voice came out wrong. It always came out wrong the first hour, thin and far off, a stranger using my throat to ask a stranger a question. You have been down a long time, Malachi said. The last leg was the long one. We are where we were going. It took me the better part of an hour to be a man again. That is how long it takes, coming up off a leg as long as our last one. The muscle comes back slow. The eyes take a while to agree on where things are. The gut does not want anything, then wants everything, then can keep nothing. I kneel in the gel I brought up and wait it out, and the ship waits with me, patient, the arms drawn back up into the dark over the tank, the spike cooling on its cradle where they laid it, still wet with the inside of my neck. I got a hand on the lip of the tank, a knee under me, then the other, and stood. The bay tilted the way it always tilted, then held. I stood there naked and streaming in the low red light of the decanting bay and did the thing I did every waking, which was reach up and put 2 fingers to the port at the base of my skull to feel that it had closed. It closes on its own once the spike is out, seals over like a mouth. Every captain who ever ran a harvester learns to check it first thing, because a port that does not close is a bad death, slow and cold, and I would rather know at the start of a watch than the end. It had closed. It always closed. I took my fingers away. There was the old smear of black on them. I wiped it on my thigh. Every morning was the same. Me, checking the hole in my own neck by the light of a red lamp 1,000 years from anywhere. The bay was cold. They keep it cold to slow the rot in a body that has just spent years at the edge of it, and I stood in the cold and let it wake the last of me, and Malachi talked while I found my legs, the way it always talked, to give a man something to come up toward. There is a suit on the rail, Malachi said. Warm. We warmed it. Your legs will not hold the ladder yet. Take the rail on the left. The right one has a burr in it. We keep meaning to file the burr, and we never file the burr. The choir came a half beat apart, and under it the one weeper wept, and I heard it that first morning, the way I said, and did not know why I was hearing a thing I had trained my ear to skip. It is good to have you back, Nathan. We do not like the ship empty. A ship should have a captain in it. It is not right. A ship going through the dark with no one awake to be afraid in it. The sleepers do not count. The sleepers are afraid the wrong way. I did not know what that meant. The sleepers are afraid the wrong way, and I did not ask. An hour out of the tank, I was in no shape to chase the strange things a ship's mind says. I filed it. I had a whole watch to get through, and no strength to spend on the ship's grief. I know now what it meant. The sleepers made the low bad current the ship ran on. The wrong kind of fear, the fear with no one home in it. Malachi was grown out of 600 men who had each been the one awake soul on a ship full of that, and it had learned to miss the other kind, the fear of a man who knows what he is afraid of. The captain's kind. It was glad to have me back the way anyone is glad of company in a long cold, even the company of the man it is going to watch walk down the same stairs as all the others. That is a lonely thing, when I hold it up to the light. The ship was lonely. 665 captains, and it had loved every one of them the only way it could, which was to keep them. It was lonely between comings. It warmed the suit. It filed the burr in its memory and never in the rail. It told me it was good to have me back, and it meant it. It was going to feed me to the tower, and it meant that too. Both were true at once. That is the ship. I cannot hate it, though I have tried, on the long watches I have now, being part of it. Through the deck I could feel the ship around me. The ship matters more than any of it, because none of the rest makes sense without her. The Corvain was old before I was born, and she would be old after the last of us. She had been a colony ship once, in the way that a cathedral was a quarry once. Somewhere back in her registry there was a clean design, 10,000 souls carried out to see the world, all of it drawn up by people who believed in the going. That ship was dead. What we ran was what she had become in the long centuries since, patched and grafted and grown over, half steel and half something else, a growth that had gotten into the steel the way rust gets into it, except this rust was warm and it moved. The corridor sweated. The bulkheads had a give to them in places, a softness, and a bare hand laid flat against the wall in the wrong section could feel it moving under the skin of the metal, slow, a swallow that took a full minute to pass. We did not put our bare hands on the walls. That was one of the first things we learned. We carried 100,000 sleepers. I said it flat just then. The flatness is how I lived with it. 100,000 people in the holds, and they were not in tanks like mine. The clean kind I came up out of. They were the ship. I walked the sleeper decks between pipes the width of a man. Clear pipes, the gel inside running gray, the people suspended in it. Their arms had gotten long. That is what the years do to them in there. The limbs draw out. The fingers spread and thin and reach. Their veins had grown out of their skin and into the ship's lines, and the ship's lines had grown back into them so that I could not always say where the person stopped and the plumbing began. They dreamed. We kept them dreaming, low and bad on purpose, because a sleeper who dreams badly makes a fear in his body, and the fear is a kind of current, and the ship ran on it. I ran a ship that ran on the bad dreams of 100,000 people. I did it for years at a stretch. When I say I woke badly, I do not mean the spike. The spike was nothing. I mean I woke into that and made coffee. There was still coffee. That is a thing nobody believes. 10 centuries out from any world that ever grew a bean, and there was a machine on the command deck that made a hot black cup of something the manifest still called coffee, and I drank it standing up, looking at the sleeper feeds, the way anyone on any ship in any age has stood and drunk something hot and watched his instruments and let his body remember how to be a body. Nathan, Malachi said, while I drank, you should come up to the bridge. You should see what we found. I know what we found, I said. You said, him. The weeping under the voice got louder for a second, then it settled. Come and see, Malachi said. It is different this time. It is always different this time. Come and see. I did not hear the shape of that yet. It is always different this time. I heard it the way I heard the ship settle, a sound the ear files as nothing because it has filed it 10,000 times. I finished the coffee. I went up. The crew before the star then, because there were 4 of us who mattered, and by the end there was 1, and I owe them more than a list. There was Mara Vos. Vos was our xenobiologist, though that word did the same work on our ship that colony did for the hull, which is to say it named a clean thing that had rotted into something else. Voss had been out on runs like ours most of her life, and she had let them cut on her to do it. Her eyes were not eyes anymore. They were compound, a cluster, faceted and dark, grown so she could see the heat coming off a dying cell. They twitched, always, a small dry twitching like a fly cleaning itself, and when she looked at me it was hard to know where she was looking or how much of me she was reading. She was the finest mind on the ship. I trusted her the way I trusted a good tool, which is completely and without warmth. I was wrong to keep it that cold. At the end she gave more than any of us, and I never told her I saw it. There was Del Marsh. Marsh ran the drive, and everything that fed it. Half his face was a plate, dull chrome gone, the color of an old tooth, seated where an accident had taken the meat off years before I knew him, and his left ear was a machine ear that never stopped catching things, so that he was forever tilting his head a few degrees, listening a little past whoever he was with, to the ship. Marsh did not believe in much. He believed in numbers. When everything came apart, it was Marsh who kept saying the numbers out loud, flat, the way another man might pray, and I have come to think it was the same thing. There was the one we called Vaughn. Vaughn was security, which on a harvester means the man a ship keeps for the day the cargo wakes up wrong, and to keep a man ready for that they load him with things, stimulants and reflex work, and a wire in the spine that makes him faster than fear, and the cost of all that is that Vaughn twitched too, but not like Voss. Voss twitched like an insect. Vaughn twitched like a man hearing a shot that has not been fired yet. He was gentle when he was level. He kept a little garden of moss and a tin on the mess table, the only green thing on the whole ship, and he watered it with the flat of a spoon. I think about the moss. past the wire and the kit. What I knew about Vaughn was that he was afraid all the time, low and steady, and the wire in his spine held the fear down where it could not reach his hands. That was the whole design of him, a frightened kid made steady by a machine. He had signed on for the same reason we all had, that the harvest run paid in one lump what a groundside life paid in 40 years, and he meant to do 3 runs and buy a strip of dirt on a green world and never leave it. He had it planned down to the fence line, the well, the kind of tree he would put in first. He would lay it out for me on a slow watch, low and steady, and I would let him. A plan like that was a kind of tin of moss, too, a small green thing kept alive with the dregs of him, and I was not going to take it from him. And there was me, Nathan Cole. I was the captain, which meant only that I was the one they woke to make the calls the ship could not make for itself, and to carry the weight of them after. I had a daughter once. Her name was Nell. She died the way people die on the worlds we came from, small and slow and for no reason anyone could fix. Before the last of her went out, a company that trades in such things took a copy of her, the whole map of her, the way the ship took the captains. They put it on a drive and sold the drive to me for everything I had. I signed onto the Corvain to reach the far end of the long dark, because the rumors that come back down the dark said there was a thing out here, that unmade death, that took people apart and put them back. I was a father with his dead child in his pocket, and no other door left to try. It was not an excuse, and I never used it as one. It was the reason I did every stupid, brave thing I did, and without the reason it all looks like foolishness. A harvest ship is not what a stranger pictures, and no one ends up captaining one the clean way. A stranger hears colony ship and thinks of the going, of people choosing a new world, and that is not what the Corvain was, and not what any of us were. The worlds I came up on were the worlds at the far end of everything, the ones 1,000 years and more down the line from whatever bright beginning put people out into the dark in the first place. They were used up. The soil was tired, the air was thin, the companies owned the water, and people worked their whole lives to owe a little less than they had owed the year before. When the sickness came into a house, it came the way weather comes, and there was no more fighting it than there is fighting weather. That is where Nell got sick. That is the kind of place. The companies that owned the water owned the ships too. They ran the harvest ships out into the deep on manifests that promised the sleepers a new world at the far end, and the sleepers signed 100,000 at a time, because a promise of a new world is the only thing a used-up world leaves a person to buy. They went into the pipes believing it. They are believing it still, dreaming toward a landfall that was never on any real chart. I knew it was a lie when I signed. I have never been able to get out from under that. I was not a sleeper. I was crew, I was a captain, I had run the manifests. I knew there was no new world at the end of a harvest run. I knew the ships went out and came back empty and went out again. I signed anyway. The company that owned the water also traded in the other thing, the copies. They had taken a copy of my girl before the last of her went, and they let it be known, the way they let things be known, that a man who captained a run to the far end of the dark might come back to a thing out there that traded in bodies, that put the copied back into the made. A captain who brought them a full ship might have his one small drive seen too, as part of the wage. I do not know if they believed it. I do not know if it was a thing they told every desperate father with a dead child on a drive, to get him to take a ship out where the saying would not go. I have decided it does not matter. I believed it enough to sign. Signing is the whole of what I did. Every reason I had was a good reason, and the good reasons carried me out past the last light and down into the tower, the same as they carried the 665 fathers, or captains, or fools before me. Because the thing that runs the harvest ships and the thing that stood the tower up out of the call were never trading in colonists or in cures. They traded in one thing, the whole time, up and down the long dark. The thing was us. The price was always going to be paid in the same coin. I carried the coin out there in my own pocket, over my own heart, and called it hope. The first watch back, before the star, before the tower, before any of it, was the last ordinary thing, and the last ordinary thing is the one worth keeping. When a captain comes up out of the tank, the ship gives him a few hours before it needs him. Hours to get his legs and his stomach and his own name back, and I spent mine the way I always spent them, which was alone, in the little cabin they gave me, with the drive. I would take it out of the pocket over my heart, where I kept it, and I would seat it in the reader on the fold-down desk, and there was a fragment on it the company had left as a sample, the way they leave a sample, to prove the map of her was a true map before they took the rest of my life for it. It was 11 seconds long. I had counted the seconds so many times I did not need to count them anymore. In it, Nell was small, 4 or 5, before the sickness, and she was telling me about a bird she had seen, and she got the word for the bird wrong. She called it the wrong bird, and she laughed at herself for it. The recording ended on the laugh. 11 seconds. A bird named wrong, and a child laughing at herself in the middle of it. I played it once. That first watch back, I always played it exactly once. To play a thing like that twice in a sitting would have been giving myself something, and I did not deserve the something. I had spent everything I was and everything I had to carry 11 seconds of my daughter across 1,000 years of dark, on the chance of the thing waiting at the far end. To play it twice would have been to admit that the 11 seconds were all there was ever going to be, and I was not ready to admit that. Not on the first watch. Not with the far end finally close. So I played it once. She saw the bird. She named it wrong. She laughed. I put the drive back in the pocket over my heart, and I went to find my crew. They were in the mess, the 3 of them, the way a crew gathers in the mess when the ship has arrived somewhere, drawn there without being called, the way men on any vessel in any age gather at the rail when the land comes up. There was a long steel table bolted to the deck, and the 4 of us had sat at it across more runs than I could hold in my head, and they had left my place, the head of it, and I took it. And for a while nobody said the thing we had all come there not to say, which was that we were here, that the going was done, that whatever we had each signed on for was on the other side of the next few days. Vaughn had his tin of moss out on the table. It was still green then. He had it in front of him, and he was tending it with the flat of a spoon the way he did, moving the little wet green with a care that did not fit the size of the man, and he did not look up when I sat. It grew on the last leg, Vaughn said. I did not think it would. I had it in the dark the whole way, and it grew anyway. He turned the tin a quarter around. Things want to keep going. Even a bit of moss in a can in the dark. It just wants to keep going. That is the whole of biology in one sentence, Voss said. She was across from him, her ruined eyes catching the mess light and throwing it in pieces. Everything alive wants only to keep going. It is the least interesting thing about life, and the only true one. But she said it without the cold she usually said such things with, and she was looking at the moss when she said it, and I think, looking back, that the tower was already in her a little, even then, already teaching her a new way to feel about a thing that keeps going and cannot stop. Marsh brought coffee to the table, 4 cups, and set them down and sat and tilted his head the few degrees he tilted it, the machine ear listening past us to the ship. She is running quiet, he said, quieter than I have ever heard her. The whole way in she has been getting quieter, like she is holding her breath. He wrapped both hands around his cup. I do not like a ship that holds its breath. You do not like anything, Vaughn said, but gently, and Marsh almost smiled with the half of his face that could. We drank the coffee. It was a good hour, the best hour. 4 people who had crossed 1,000 years of nothing together and arrived at the same place at the same time, and there is a closeness in that no groundling will ever have. The closeness of people who have slept the same dark and woken to the same star. I looked at the 3 of them around the table. I would outlast all 3 of them. The star was calling. The drive was in my pocket. There was no version of any of us that turned the ship around. What has taken me the longest to make peace with is that it was not a wrong turn that brought us here. There was never a right turn. There was only the going, and the going only went one place. To the far end, Vaughn said, and raised his cup and we raised ours and drank to the far end, and the far end heard us, I think. I think it always hears us drink to it. I think that is one of the small glad sounds it waits for. That watch, when the others had gone to their bunks, I took the drive out again. I did not play it. I had spent my one playing already, the way I always spent it, once and no more, because a copy of a thing is not the thing, and playing it twice is a way of pretending it is. But I could hold it. Holding it was allowed. I sat in the little cabin with the star not yet in the glass and turned the gray wafer over in my fingers and let it go warm against them. There was a readout on it, a small honest line of company text I knew how to find, that told me the map was whole. I checked it the way I checked the port at the back of my neck, every waking out of the same fear that the thing I could not afford to lose had come loose in the dark. It said the map was whole, 11 seconds, and the whole of her sealed under them. I made myself believe the word whole, because that was the bargain, and the bargain was not the 11 seconds. The 11 seconds were the sample, the taste the company left to sell me the rest. The rest was under them, the full map, 4 or 5 years of a girl folded down into a wafer. And out here, the rumors said, there was a thing that could take a map and stand the country back up off it. Take the copy and make it the maid. I had crossed 1,000 years on that one sentence. I had signed my life away on it. I turned it over in the dark and did not say it out loud, because saying it out loud would have let me hear how it sounded, and I needed it to keep not sounding like what it was. I thought about what I would say to the thing when I reached it. I had a speech. I had built it over years of watches, worried a word smooth here and there the way I would worry a stone. I would explain about Nell. I would tell it I had brought the whole map, sealed, whole. I would ask it plainly, the way I would ask a hard man for a hard thing, to put her back into a body. I believed that watch, that a thing old enough to be called God would at least hear a father out. I put her back in the pocket over my heart, and I carried the speech up the ladder with me, whole, the way I still believed the map was whole. The bridge of the Corvain was a blister of dark glass up near the ship's brow, and when I came up the ladder into it, the four of us were there, and beyond the glass was the star, and I stopped with my hand still on the rail. I had seen stars my whole life. I had been closer to more of them than any groundling ever will. I knew what a star was supposed to do, which is burn, which is throw light out into the dark, whether anyone is there to catch it or not. This one did not do that. This one leaked. It hung out there swollen and wrong, too big and too close. A bruised violet color shot through with black, and it did not shine so much as bleed. A slow, cold light that came off it, in a way light is not supposed to move, sluggish, like something running down a wall. It hurt to look at, and it was worse to look away, because when I looked away, I could still feel it, a pressure at the back of the eye, a color the eye keeps seeing after it has stopped. That is the star, Malachi said, gentle, the choir a half beat apart. We call it the bleeding star. All of us called it that. Every one of us that came this far named it the same name before we knew we had. You will too. You already have. I had. The name was in my mouth before Malachi said it, and I did not know where I had gotten it, and I told myself I had read it in the old logs during decant, that it had come up out of the ship's records, into me, while I slept, and that was reasonable, and I believed it, and I was wrong. Under the star was the world. We had come to it out of the dark, and it had no name, because no chart, out of any world I knew, had ever put a mark this far. But the ship called it the Call, so I called it the Call, and again the name was in me before I chose it. It was a world the way the Corvain was a colony ship, which is to say had been one once, or something had, and now it was a corpse that had not finished being a corpse. It hung under the leaking star, and it was not stone. Stone can be told at a distance, even a strange stone. This was not stone. It was pale and ridged, pulled tight and shining in places, split in others, and out of the splits came a slow, dark weeping that hung around it in the vacuum where weeping has no business hanging. The whole world had the look of a thing that had scabbed over a wound and gone on being a wound underneath. Marsh had the readings up. He read them out flat. Mass is wrong for the size, Marsh said. Density says bone. Density says it is bone the whole way down, the size of a small moon, bone and something under the bone that reads like meat, kept just above freezing. He tilted his head, the machine ear working. It has a pulse. Nobody said anything to that. Voss leaned toward the glass, her cluster of an eye twitching, drinking the heat off the thing. It is dividing, Voss said, quiet. The surface, not weathering, not eroding. The cells are dividing, slowly. It is a body, and it is still trying to grow. And it cannot, and it keeps trying. She put a hand flat on the glass, which was a thing she did, reading through her palm as much as her eyes. It is in pain, she said. The whole world is in pain. I can see the pain from here. I told her to keep that to herself, and she did. And I was wrong, too, because it was true, and a captain who tells the truth to shut its mouth has already begun to lose. And rising off the call, out of the deepest of the splits, out of what would have been the pole of the thing, if a world's corpse can be said to have a pole, there was the spine. I have tried to find a way to make the spine land for a person who was not there, and I have not found one. So, the facts will have to do. It was a tower. It rose off the surface of that bone world and up out of its atmosphere. If the haze around the call was an atmosphere and not just the breath of the wound. It kept rising, out into the dark, a needle of pale matter, the color of old ivory, and it did not stop where a mountain stops or where a tower stops. Marsh put a number on it. The number was 1,000 kilometers. He checked it and gave it again, because the first time, no one believes it. 1,000 kilometers of it, standing up off a dead world into empty space, and it was not smooth. Where the light of the leaking star fell along it, I could see it was jointed, knuckled, wet in the joints. Out of the joints, all the long length of it, there came a fine mist, blown out into the vacuum and hanging, a mist that Voss read and did not want to read. Blood, she said. Vaporized. Blood and the fluid from around a spine. It is venting. It has been venting for a very long time. And it hummed. We could not hear it, not through the hall, not in vacuum, but we could feel it, all four of us at once, a pressure under the sound of things, low. Below the lowest note I could hear, and still call a note. It did a thing to the body. My teeth ached. I had a filling from a bad year on a bad world, and it woke up and sang. Marsh put his hand to his chrome plate. Later, when we went down close, the hum got into the metal of the plate, into the wire in Vaughn's spine, into the machine of Voss's eye. It made the grafts in all of them try to lift away from the meat that was still ahead of us. On the bridge, it was only the teeth, only the filling, only the pressure. I told myself it was the ship. I told myself a lot of things on that bridge, and every one of them was reasonable, and every one of them was a door I was choosing not to look behind. The signal comes from the tower, Malachi said. It always comes from the tower. It is calling. It has been calling the whole time, on a band under the band we hear, and the ship hears it even when we do not, and the ship steers to it. That is why we are here. That is why any of us are ever here. It called, and the Corvain came the way she came the last time and the time before. What do you mean, the last time? I said. The choir went quiet. Not silent. Under the quiet, the one weeper wept, and now there was more than one. I marked that. I told myself I did not mark it. You should assemble a team, Malachi said, which was not an answer, and I let it not be an answer, because I was already looking at the tower, and the drive with my daughter on it was a small, hard weight against my chest, and somewhere in the back of my head a door I had kept shut my whole grieving life had come open, a crack, and let in a light. And the light was this. A thing that vents the fluid of a spine for 1,000 kilometers into the dark. A thing a whole ship's worth of the dead will steer toward and call God. Is a thing that knows how a body is made. And a thing that knows how a body is made can make one, can put a small girl back into one. I know how that sounds. I knew how it sounded then, but I was not out of my mind. I was a captain who had run the numbers, and the numbers said the ship was here. We had crossed the dark. The fuel to cross it again was not in the tanks, and whatever waited at the end of the going was the only thing there was left to do, and every reason I had was a good reason. That is the trap. I walked all the way into it on good reasons, and so will the man who wakes after me on the same ones. We stood on the bridge a long time before anyone said the thing out loud, which was that we were going to have to go down to it. Voss would not come away from the glass. She had her palm flat on it and her ruined eyes an inch from it, drinking the tower. When I told her to step back, she did not seem to hear me, and Marsh had to take her by the shoulder. Even then, she came away slow, reluctant, the way a child comes away from a thing it has been told 100 times not to touch. There was that new warmth in her face, and I put it down to wonder, to the once-in-a-life thing of a scientist meeting the largest question she will ever meet. I put a great many things down to reasonable causes on that bridge. It is what a captain does. He is the one who has to have a reasonable cause, out loud, for the crew, so I had them, one after another, and every one of them was a door. I have never read anything like it, Voss said. It is not that it is strange I could work with. It is that it is familiar. She turned from the glass and looked at the three of us, and her faceted eyes threw our faces back at us in pieces. You feel it too. Do not tell me you do not. It called and the ship came, but it is not only the ship that answered. Something in us answered. I have felt drawn to a specimen before, the good kind of drawn, the kind that makes you take up the blade. This is not that. This is the drawn you feel toward the edge of a high place, the part of you that wants to step off. She said it calmly, as a finding, and then she turned back to the glass. The words that mattered were the edge of a high place. A person who says she feels the pull to step off a height is already leaning toward the drop. I heard only a clean scientific description of a real effect, and I filed it, and I lost her a little more with every hour I filed her. Vaughn had his back to the glass. He would not look at the tower at all. He stood with his arms crossed and his weapon across his chest and his eyes on the deck, and the twitch was going in him, the twitch of a shot not yet fired, worse than I had seen it. I do not like it, Vaughn said. That was all. Vaughn was not a man of many words, even level, and he was not level. I do not like it, and I do not have a reason, and not having a reason is the reason. When I get this, and there is no cause for it, there is always a cause. I just have not found it yet. He looked up at me. Permission to break out the heavy kit before we go down. All of it. I want everything we have on that lander. I gave it to him. It made no difference. In the end, none of it fired a shot that mattered, but I gave it to him because a captain gives his security man his kit, and because Vaughn had earned the one comfort he ever asked for, which was to be ready, and I have been glad since that I did not deny him the being ready, even though the tower took him anyway, even though there is no kit for what the tower does. Marsh said the fuel. He had run it 3 times while the rest of us looked at the star. We do not have the burn to leave, he said. I have checked it against the reserve, and against the reserve behind the reserve. We came in on fumes. Whatever is in that tower, the record says it is where the ships before us refueled, and the record is the only thing that has ever gotten a Corvain home from a place like this. We go down, or we sit here and die slow when the air plant gives out in a few years. Those are the numbers. He tilted his head, the machine ear working the ship. I do not like the numbers, but I do not have to like the numbers. I only have to read them, and they read go down. And Malachi, from all around us, the choir a half beat apart, said, the tower provides. It has always provided. Every Corvain that came here left here full. Go down, and it will fill you, and you will go home. And under the words, lo, the weeping. And I marked the weeping, and did not ask why a ship would weep while it told me we would go home, because I did not want the answer. And a captain who does not want the answer has already been beaten. He is only working out the terms. We spent 3 of the ship's days closing on the call, and in those 3 days the wrongness stopped being something out the glass and started being something in the ship and in us. It came first for the sleepers. Vaughn found it. He walked the sleeper decks once a shift. It was the one duty he never gave up, and on the second day he came up to the bridge with his face the gray of the gel, and he told me the sleepers had turned. Not all of them. The section down near the bow, the pipes that ran closest to the outer hull on the side that faced the star. He took me down and showed me, and I have carried it since. The people in those pipes had turned to face the same way. However, a sleeper drifts in the gel, slow, aimless, the way anything drifts in fluid. These had all come around, a whole section of them, 10,000 long, thin, dreaming bodies, and their faces, what the years had left of their faces, were all turned toward the outer hull, toward the star, toward the spine, and their long-grown fingers had spread against the inside of the pipes on that side, spread and pressed. 10,000 hands laid flat against the glass in the same direction, the way I'd seen Voss lay her hand on the bridge glass to read what was on the other side. "They are listening to it," Vaughn said. His voice was careful. Vaughn was a careful man when he was level. The dreaming ones, they turned to it in the night. All of them on this face. What do I do? I told him there was nothing to do, which was true. I told him it was a drift pattern, a current in the lines, which was not true, and which he knew was not true. He looked at me with the careful, gray face, and let me say it, because I was the captain. And it is a mercy a crew does, its captain, to let him say the reasonable thing out loud so everyone can pretend together for one more shift. We went back up. That night I dreamed for the first time in years. In the dream, I had my hand flat against a cold pipe, and I was turned toward the star with the rest of them. I woke with my arm gone dead under me, stretched out from the bunk, my fingers spread against the cold bulkhead. I lay there a long time before I pulled it back. I did not sleep again after the dream, so I did what there is to do. At that hour I'm a ship, which is walk it. I went down through the sweating decks, past the sections we had learned not to touch, and I ended up where I always ended up on a bad watch, which was the sleeper decks. Because there is a company on the sleeper decks, even if it is a terrible company, 100,000 slow dreamers, and I would rather stand among the sleeping than sit alone. I walked the long aisle between the pipes with my headlamp low. The gel ran gray on either side of me. The people hung in it, drawn out and reaching. I did the thing I had trained myself over years not to do, which was look at their faces. I had trained myself not to, on a harvester. I had trained myself to see the pipes as pipes, the current as current, the manifest as a number, because if I saw them as 100,000 people, I could not run the ship, and the ship must be run. So I unsaw them, shift after shift, year after year, until the unseeing was the most practiced thing I did. But it was a bad watch, and I looked. There was a woman in the pipe nearest me, or there had been a woman. Her face had that stretched, dreaming calm they all have. Her mouth moved, slow, the way they all move, working at a dream. I stood and watched her mouth, and made myself remember that she had been a person. She had signed a paper somewhere on some world, believing she was going to sleep and wake on a new one, believing the Corvain was carrying her out to a beginning, the way I had believed the ship was carrying me out to a cure. We had both read the same lie off the same kind of paper. We were both cargo. The only difference between the woman in the pipe and me was that I got a few hours a decade to stand in the aisle and know it. That was the horror of the ship, and I want to name it plainly here, before the tower, because the tower only finished a thing the ship had started. We ran on their fear. I have said it. We kept 100,000 people dreaming badly on purpose, because the badness of the dream made a current, and the current ran the ship, and I had known it the way I knew a fact on a form, a cold, clean piece of operating knowledge, and I had never once let it be what it was, which was 100,000 people held at the edge of a nightmare for 1,000 years, so that a hull could cross the dark. I let it be what it was, that watch, standing in the aisle, and then I unsaw it again, because I had to, because the ship must be run, and I went back up, and it was only later, in the chamber, when the thing behind my eyes showed me what it did, with the fear poured in fresh, that I understood the Corvain and the harvester had never been two different things. The ship was a small harvester. We had built a little one to carry us to the big one. We had been in the business the whole time. We just called our God a drive and our garden a manifest. On the way back up, Malachi spoke to me unasked, out of the dark of the stairwell. You looked at them, Malachi said. The captains, who last a long time, stop looking. Renner looked. At the end. Every one of us who looks is close to the end. A pause. The choir scattering. I am sorry. Would you like to hear one of us? We keep all of you. Sometimes it helps a man to hear that he is not the first to walk down. I should have said no. I said nothing, which a ship's mind takes for yes, and Malachi played me a voice out of the choir. One voice pulled up clear of the weeping, a man's voice, tired, flat, a captain's voice recording a log at the worst hour, and the voice said, I have a girl on a drive over my heart, and a star out the glass that is calling my name in my own mouth. And I am going to go down to the tower tomorrow, because there is no fuel to do anything else. And every reason I have is a good reason. I want that understood. I was not a fool. I was a father with his dead child in his pocket and no other door left to try. And the voice stopped, and the stairwell was quiet except for the weeping under everything, and I stood on the steps with my hand on the cold rail and my heart going because the words were mine. Not like mine. Mine. Word for word, the thing I had been telling myself since the bridge, the exact shape of my own reasoning, in a stranger's tired voice, recorded I did not know how long ago, kept in the choir with all the rest. Who was that? I said. A captain, Malachi said. One of us. It does not matter which. You all say it. You have all always said it. That is how we know you are close to the end. And then softer, the whole choir together for a moment, the way it went together only when it was telling the truth. Do not go down, Nathan. But you will. You always go down. We are so glad. I told myself the ship was old and coming apart. I told myself a mind grown out of 600 dead men would of course have 600 versions of the same tired thought in it, and would of course play me one that sounded like mine. Because all frightened fathers sound alike at the worst hour. That was reasonable. I believed it. I went up and made coffee and did not let the sum finish, the way I did not let any of the sums finish, right up until the tower finished them all for me. Then it came for us. The light did it. The closer we drew to the call, the more of that leaking violet came in through the glass, and it was not light that behaved. It fell on a thing. It went into the thing. It did work in there. I noticed my hands first. The nails had begun to lift at the beds, and along the lifted edge the skin had gone busy, a red rawness that was not a cut, did not hurt, would not stop. A place where the flesh had started making more of itself with no plan and no reason, the way the call was making more of itself, the way the star had taught everything in its light to do. I kept my gloves on after that. Marsh's chrome plate grew a fur of corrosion overnight that he scraped off, and that came back by the next watch. Vaughn's moss, the little tin garden on the mess table, went from green to a black that glistened. It doubled. It began to climb the tin. He put it out an airlock and did not talk about it, and his hands shook when he came back. Voss watched all of it with her twitching cluster of an eye, and she was the only one of us who was not afraid, and that was its own kind of wrong. She had begun to spend her off shifts at the glass, close to it, her palm flat on it, her ruined eyes an inch from the star, and when I told her to rest, she said she was resting. She was learning, and there was a thing in her voice I had not heard from her before, a warmth, and Voss had no warmth, none, ever. The warmth coming into her voice as we neared the thing should have frightened me more than the star did. It did not. I had a door open in my own head by then and a light coming through it, and I could not see the same light coming on in the people around me. I thought it was only mine. Malachi got worse the whole 3 days. The choir came further and further apart, so that a single sentence would spread out across a breath and a half, the voices scattering, and the weeping under it stopped being one weeper and became a sound with no bottom to it, and Malachi began to slip. A ship's mind is supposed to hold the line between what it knows and what it says, the way a captain holds it. Malachi's line had worn through in places, and things came through the worn places. Once, when I asked for the fuel state, Malachi gave me the number and then said, in a voice from somewhere far back in the choir, a voice that did not sound like the others, "Do not go down." Renner went down. Renner is in the wall. And then the front of the choir came back over it, smooth, and said, "Fuel is as stated. You will need to go down to refuel. The tower provides. It always provides." And I asked who Renner was, and Malachi said, "A captain, one of us. You do not need Renner," and would say no more. Once, in the dark of the third night, over the ship's speakers, with no one having asked it anything, Malachi said, "Clear," all the voices for once landing on the same beat, which they never did, which was the thing that woke me. This is the 666th time the Corvain has come to the Bleeding Star, and then a long pause, the voices scattering again. "We are sorry. We are so glad. We have found him again. Welcome back, Nathan. We are sorry." I lay in my bunk and did the arithmetic of the worst hour, the arithmetic I already knew the answer to, and did anyway. 666 times. 600 and more voices in the choir. A new captain woken for each coming, 92% compatible with what the last one left in the tank. I did the arithmetic and did not let it finish. A captain who lets that arithmetic finish at that hour does not get up and run his ship, and I still had a ship to run, a light in my head, a small, hard weight against my chest. So I stopped the sun before it landed. I got up. I made coffee. I told myself the ship's mind was old and coming apart, which was true, and that a mind coming apart says things, which was true, and that none of it changed what had to be done. That last was the truest and the worst thing I told myself in all of it, because the fuel was low. That part was real. Whatever else Malachi was, the tanks were the tanks, and the numbers Marsh read were not the numbers of a mind coming apart. They were cold, and they were his, and they said the same thing Malachi said. We do not have the fuel to leave. We had crossed the last of the dark, on the last of what we had, and the only thing at the end of the crossing that could put fuel back in a ship was the tower. The way the tower had done it 665 times before, providing the way Malachi said, the way the dead all around me in the walls had believed, right up until the ship folded them into the choir. So there was no choice. I have thought about that a great deal since. Whether there was ever a choice at any of the 666 comings, or whether it was made a long way back and a long way up by whoever built a ship that steers itself toward a calling in the dark and wakes a man only to walk him down a road already worn smooth by the men before him. I do not know. I know that I stood on my bridge, looked at the tower, and told my crew we were going down. Every one of them had a good reason to go. I gave them the reasons. They were real. We went. Voss went because the tower was the deepest question her ruined eyes had ever been pointed at, and she could no more not go than a stone cannot fall. Marsh went because the fuel was in the tower, and Marsh was the man who knew fuel, and because Marsh believed in numbers, and the numbers said go, and his faith in them would carry him into anything they pointed at. It was a faith like any other, and like any other it could get him killed. Vaughn went because I ordered him, and because he was the man we kept for the moment. The thing turned out worse than the reasons that had walked us into it, and every one of us knew, without saying it, that this was that kind of walking, and that Vaughn was the tax we paid to do it. And I went, because my daughter was in my pocket, and the thing that could put her back was 1,000 kilometers of standing bone across a stretch of dark. There is no fuel state, no ship's mind, no arithmetic at the worst hour that would have kept me off that tower. I did not go down brave. I went down for the oldest and the stupidest and the strongest reason there is, and it walked me straight into the mouth of the thing, the way it had walked 665 fathers, or captains, or fools, in ahead of me. Their reasons were as good as mine. They are in the wall. The lander was the one clean thing left on the Corvain, a hard little wedge of a craft kept in a bay near the keel for exactly this. For the day a captain had to put boots on a surface, and I was glad of it. Glad of the one part of my ship that was still only metal and did not have the warm rot in it. We four went down in it. Malachi flew it, or the front of the choir did, and the back of the choir wept the whole way. I told Malachi to cut the internal audio. Malachi said it could not, that the weeping was not on a channel, that it was only there. I let it be. We fell toward the call, and the spine grew in the forward glass until it was not a tower anymore. It was a wall. It was the whole of the forward glass, ivory and knuckled and wet. The mist of vaporized blood came off it and streaked back along our hull as we closed. Where it touched the lander, it hissed and left a haze on the glass that Marsh saw eat a fine layer off the outer pane over our approach. The hum was in the lander now, and it was in us. Voss's eye ticked faster, a dry, frantic cleaning. Marsh had both hands on his chrome plate, holding it to his face, because the hum wanted it off him. I could see the edge of the plate had lifted a hair's width from the skin, a thin, dark line of raw wet showing at the seam where metal had been married to a man, and the marriage was coming apart in the tower song. Vaughn had gone very still, the way he went still before the worst work, the twitch gone out of him all at once, which was more frightening than the twitch had ever been. He held his weapon across his chest and said nothing. I had flown down to a lot of surfaces in my life. I knew the feel of a descent, the way the thing I was falling toward takes hold a little more with every minute, the way it stops being a light in the glass and becomes a place with a top and a bottom and a weight. This was not that. This was falling toward a thing that had no top. We had been falling a long time, and the spine still rose out of the forward glass and off the top of it and kept going, up past where the lander could look. No matter how long we fell, we never got the whole of it in the window at once. We only got more wall, more knuckled ivory streaming its mist of old blood. Never seeing the whole of it did a thing to the mind that I have never shaken. The mind wants an edge. It wants to know the size of what is going to kill it. The spine would not give us one. Some animal part of each of us kept reaching for the edge and kept not finding it, and after a while that reaching is its own kind of exhaustion. We were all four of us worn down by it before we ever touched the base, worn thin the way I went thin at the end of a long shift when the readouts start to swim. The closer we fell, the more the tower filled everything, and the details came up out of the pale, more than I could take in at once. The knuckles were joints. The joints wept. Around each joint, the ivory was stained down its length with the weeping, old and new, layer on layer, the way a thing stains that has been bleeding in the same places for a long time and healing wrong between. And set into the pale, here and there, too regular to be nothing and too strange to be anything I could name, there were dark seams, long shut seams, like the one that would open for us at the base. I did not say what I thought they were. Voss did not say it either, though she saw them, her eye ticking over each one as we passed it. What I thought was that a body has more than one way in, and that a thing this size had as many doors as it wanted, and that we were flying down to the lowest of them, the low door. I made myself stop the thought there and fly the approach. Anything alive reads warm, Marsh said, low, watching his board. The whole structure. There is no dead rock in it anywhere, warm the whole way up as far as the lander can see. It is one body. I keep saying it and I keep needing to say it because my head keeps trying to make it a building. He tilted the machine ear. It is not a building. We are landing on a body. Say it back to me, Captain, so I know I am not the only one keeping it straight. It is a body, I said. We are landing on a body. We are landing on a body, Voss said from the glass. And there was that warmth in it. The wrong warmth. And Marsh looked at her and then looked at me. And neither of us said anything about the warmth, because there was nothing to say and a surface coming up. The base came up, smooth and blind and pale, and I reached for the override to hold us off, and in the last seconds before I touched it, I felt the tower feel us. I cannot put it better. I have felt it in a quiet room, the certainty that someone behind me has looked up before any sound. The whole 1,000 kilometers of it knew that 4 small warm things had come down out of the dark. It was glad, and the gladness came down the length of it, into the lander, into the meat of me. My hand stopped short of the override. I have wondered since whether it stopped because the tower stopped it, or because some part of me had wanted to be let in from the start. There was no dock. I had wondered how we would make fast to a thing like that, and the answer was that we did not. We came down to the base of the spine to where it rose off the pole of the call. There was no port, no hatch, no lock, nothing a builder would have made. I told Malachi to hold us off and find a way in. Malachi did not hold us off. Malachi flew us in against the smooth, pale expanse of the base, a place with no feature to it at all, and I opened my mouth to countermand. Before the words were out, the expanse moved. It opened. There was no clean word. A seam appeared in the smooth, pale matter and drew apart, wet, ringed, with a muscle that flexed as it widened. It was a mouth, and it was not a mouth. It was the other kind. The low kind, the kind a body uses at its other end, a ring of muscle that dilated with a slow sucking pull, and beyond it was a dark that glistened. The pull of it took us. I felt the lander tugged out of Malachi's holding, drawn forward and down into the dark. The ring closed behind us with a sound we felt through the frame, a wet clap. We were inside. A fluid came up around the lander, thick and yellow and moving, and where it climbed the glass, it began at once to work at the hull. Marsh watched a rime of our own craft dissolve off the outside of the pane. "It is digesting us," he said flat. "The fluid. It thinks we are food. We have maybe an hour before it is through the outer hull." That was the first time any of us said the word digesting. It sat in the little cabin with us, and none of us picked it up. For a while, none of us moved. The lander sat, canted in the yellow fluid at the bottom of the thing. The fluid climbed the glass slow, and where it climbed, it worked. We sat in the cabin and watched the level rise and listened to the sound the hull made as the outer skin of our one clean craft was taken down a layer at a time. It was not a loud sound. It was a small, busy sound, patient. The sound of something with all the time there is doing careful work on a thing that cannot get away. It came up through the frame, into the seats, into us. We sat in it. Vaughn had all his kit. He had the heavy weapons he had asked me for on the bridge, racked and ready in the little cabin, everything the Corvain could arm a man with. He sat there with all of it and looked at the fluid climbing the glass, and I watched him understand, the way I was understanding, that there was nothing in the rack for this. There is no shooting a stomach, no laying down fire on the inside of a thing that means to digest the men inside it. All the kit did was sit there and be heavy and be useless. Vaughn's hands moved over it anyway, checking, seating, the way a frightened man's hands go to the thing they know. I did not stop him. The checking was the only comfort left in the cabin, and I was not going to take it from him. "The suits will hold longer than the lander," Marsh said. "The suits are rated for the drive room. This fluid is slower than the drive room. We have time outside the lander. Not much. More than in it." He was reading it off his board, flat, the numbers man giving us the one thing he had, which was how long. The way up is out and up. There is only up. Whatever is calling is up. He looked at me, and his one eye was steady in the ruined half of his face. I'd rather die climbing than sitting in a stomach watching the glass, Captain. If it is the same to you, it was the same to me. So we suited. We did the drill we had all done 1,000 times. The seals and the checks. It was strange past telling to do the ordinary drill inside that place, to hear Voss call her seal good and Vaughn call his good in the flat voice of 100 routine drills while the fluid ate the glass. The drill was a mercy too, one more ordinary thing to hold to. I have come to believe the whole of being a crew is a set of ordinary things we held to so we could walk into places no animal would walk into, and that when the ordinary things run out, so does the crew. Ours had not run out yet. We sealed our suits and cracked the lander. The fluid came in around our boots at once, warm even through the suit, like stepping down into a thing that closed over the boot with interest. Voss was first out. Of course she was first out, already leaning toward the up. We went after her. Out of the last clean thing the Corvain had, into the base of the tower. The lander sank behind us into the fluid. I did not look back at it. It was going the way everything there went, down and in, taken apart slow by a thing that would not let it finish. There was no help for it. Up was the only direction that was not worse. The inside of the spine came to us in the order the body registers a thing it was not built to survive, which is not the order the mind would choose. The floor first, because it is the thing under the boot. It was not floor. It gave under the boot the way the ship's soft sections gave, but wetter, warmer even through the suit. It was ridged, and the ridges ran a certain way. Voss knelt and put her glove to it and said it was a tongue, that the whole base of the tower was lined with the tissue of a tongue, taste and all, that we were walking on something that could taste us walking on it. I told her to get up. She got up. Then the walls, because I looked for the walls, looked for the edges of the place, to know how big my dying was going to be. The walls of the spine were not walls. They were made of people. Not our people. Not any people. They were the flayed and pressed and kept remains of things that had come to the bleeding star and been taken into it, layer on layer, the way the faces were packed in the far chamber, except here in the lower reaches. I could still tell what the layers had been. They had been many kinds of thing. Faces that were almost men. Faces that were nothing like men. Wide, flat faces, and faces that were mostly eye, and faces that were a ring of small faces around a hole. All of them skinned. All of them pressed into the wall like specimens in a case. All of them alive. Voss found it and could not stop finding it. She went along the wall with her glove out, not touching, reading the heat. She said it calm, almost tender. They are not dead. None of them. The cells are dividing. He keeps them dividing. He does not let anything here finish dying. It is a garden. He is growing a garden of everything that ever came, and nothing in it is allowed to be dead, and nothing in it is allowed to be alive, and it has been going for longer than there have been stars to see it by. And the faces watched us go by. The eyes tracked. The skinned mouths opened and closed in the slow tide, and out of them came the black, slow weeping. When I put my light close to one, a face that was almost a man's face, its eyes came around to the light and fixed on it, and its mouth worked. No sound came. There was no air in it to make a sound. But the shape the mouth made was a shape I knew. I turned my light off it. I did not tell the others what shape it was, and I will not say it now, because some things a father keeps. Marsh went along the wall behind Voss, reading it his own way, which was to measure. He put a gloved hand near a pressed face, gnawed on it, and he read the temperature off his suit, and he said the number, flat, and then he moved to the next and said that number, and the numbers were all the same, a few degrees above freezing. The temperature a thing is kept at when it must neither rot nor heal. The temperature of the meat under the caul, the temperature Voss had read off the sleepers in the pipes when they turned. He holds the whole garden at one setting, Marsh said. One setting, everywhere, all of it. It is the most consistent system I have ever measured. 1,000 kilometers of tissue at one temperature, held for longer than there have been stars. Do you know what it takes to hold a thing that steady that long? Do you know the control? He said it the way he said everything, but I heard the thing under it, because I had shipped with Marsh a long time. Marsh believed in numbers, and here was a number that believed back. A system more perfect than anything men had ever built, and it had built itself out of the flayed and the kept. And the perfection of it was doing to Marsh what the calling could not. It was getting in through the one door a numbers man leaves open, which is his respect for a thing that works. I made myself keep climbing, and I made myself look at the wall as I climbed, because a captain who will not look is no use, and I had unseen enough for one life, and that is how I found the face I found. It was in the wall at the height of my shoulder, at a bend in the rise, pressed in among the others, skin like the others, kept dividing like the others, its eyes tracking my light like the others. But it was a man's face, and it was recent enough that it had not sunk far into the layers, recent enough that I knew it. I knew it because I had seen it that same watch, hours before, in the choir, or rather I had heard the voice that went with it, the tired, flat voice of the captain who had said my own words back to me in the stairwell. I do not know how I knew. The face went. with the voice. I knew. A thing this old does not bother to hide the joins, or it wanted them seen, I cannot say which. The face of the captain before me was pressed into the tower with its eyes open and its mouth working. It saw my light. It fixed on me. Its skinned mouth made a shape, and the shape was not my name. The shape was a word I had said to myself 100 times on the way up. The shape was do not. He was still in there. Whatever the ship had kept of him and folded into the choir, some other part of him was here in the tissue, dividing, not dead, seeing me climb the same stairs he had climbed, making the shape of the only warning he had left. It was the same warning Malachi wept at me. Do not, do not, do not. It had never once worked, not in 665 tries, and it was not going to work on me either. He could see that too, from inside the wall. That was its own kind of hell, to be kept alive enough to watch the next fool climb the same stairs. I did not tell Marsh or Voss what the face was. Voss was past hearing me, and Marsh did not need one more true thing to respect. I put my light off it and I climbed, and behind me I could feel it watching me go, the way I had felt the sleepers watching the star, a thing that cannot follow, wanting to. The rise went up a long way. I lost the count of it. Time did the thing it does in the last stretch of a thing like that. It came apart. It ran fast and slow at once. I would find I had climbed a stretch with no memory of climbing it, and then a single step would take an age, my boot coming up off the tongue floor with a wet reluctance, as though the tower did not want to give the boot back. The hum was in everything now. It had found the machine in Voss's eye, the plate on Marsh's face, the wire in Vaughn's spine. Under the weeping the tower made, and the hum I could not hear and only felt. I could make out a new small sound, a sound of metal and meat trying to come apart, the graphs in my crew lifting at the seams. Marsh had stopped holding his plate to his face, because holding it did no good, and the thin line of wet dark had opened all the way around it, where the tower's song was working the machine loose from the man. He climbed with it like that and said nothing. Said the numbers. We went up. There was a way up, a slow inner rise that wound through the tissue of the tower. We climbed it because down was the stomach and up was the calling, and the calling had a pull now that I felt in the meat of me, the way the sleepers had felt it and turned to it in their pipes. Voss climbed ahead of us, too fast, her glove trailing the wall, reading. She talked as she climbed, and I let her talk, because the talk was the last of the Voss I knew, and I wanted to keep it as long as I could. I had it backward, Voss said. We all have it backward. Every world we ever came from, every history, every book that ever told us where we came from, we thought we came up. We thought we started small in the worlds and grew. We did not. She stopped at a place in the wall where the layers changed, where under the pressed faces there was a band of something else, a band of fused bone and matter that ran level all the way around. She put her whole hand on it, bare intent, in the ruined eyes, and read it. Here, she said. It is written here, in the way he grew it. We did not come from the worlds. We came from him. We are pieces of him. When he was whole, when he was young, if he was ever young, he was hurt. Something opened him, and what came out of the wound, what he shed, what a body sheds from a wound, to close it, drifted out into the dark and cooled, and caught on the worlds and did not stop. That is us. We are the matter he bled. We are not his children. We are not a garden he planted. She turned and looked back down at me. Her faceted eyes caught my light and threw it back in 100 small pieces. She was smiling, and I had never seen Voss smile. We are his cancer, she said. The worlds are the scab. Every person who ever lived is one cell of the wrong thing. His body has been trying to heal since before the first light, and he has finally started to clean the wound. That is what this is. That is what we are. We are the infection, and we have come home to the wound, and he is so glad. He is so glad we came. I told her to stop. I told her, Captain DeCrew, to stop. She stopped talking, but she did not stop climbing, and she did not stop smiling. The warmth was all through her now, and I understood too late, in the way I understood everything on that tower too late, that the warmth was not Voss. The warmth was the calling. coming up into her. Through the glove she would not take off the wall. It had been coming into her since the bridge, since she first laid her palm on the glass. She was further up the tower than any of us, in every way there was to be. I had let her lead because she was my finest tool, and I had walked her up ahead of me into the thing, the way I walked all of them, on good reasons, always on good reasons. The rise opened out, and we were in the chamber, the one I opened this with. We had climbed to it, and now it was in front of us, and it did what it does. The walls wept, and the ceiling was a turning knot of nerve, and the floor was a tongue, and the harvester filled all of it. What the harvester was, I have kept back until now, because the more of it goes into words, the smaller it gets, and it was not small. So, once and plainly, it was a mountain of the living. Take everything that was in the walls, every flayed and kept and dividing thing, every face that could not die, pile it up past the height of a hab tower, past the height of anything men build, fuse it, let it grow through itself and back into itself for an age of ages. Run raw nerve through all of it like the lines through the sleeper decks. Hang it in a chamber lit the color of the bleeding star and let it move, slow the way the whole call moved, the way a thing in great pain moves when it cannot hold still and cannot get free. It had limbs. Not two, not four. Every limb that had ever been folded into it, arms and things that were not arms, reaching and drawing back, and it had faces. It had faces the way a hard boil has bubbles, without number, rising to the surface of it and sinking back, each one open, each one working, every one of them in pain. Under all of it was one thing. Not hunger, though it was hungry. Not malice, though what it did to us was past any malice a human hand could raise. Pain. It was in pain the size of the pain of everything it had ever taken, all at once, forever. It had been in that pain since before the light, and it had found the one thing that made the pain less. The one thing was us. Because it did not eat us to grow. Voss had that part right, and this part too, though she was past telling me by then. It ate us for the fear. A mind taken apart while it is still awake makes a fear that has no bottom. The same current we ran the ship on. The same bad dream. We kept 100,000 people dreaming, so the Corvain could cross the dark. The harvester had learned, in its age of ages, that a great enough fear poured into it fresh, dulled the pain the way nothing else could. We were not its children, and we were not its food. We were the drug it took to get through one more hour of being what it was. It wanted us afraid before it took us, because the fear was the thing it needed. So it did not kill quickly, it did not kill kindly. It took its time, and it made sure. I know all of that, because it put it into me, not in words. It has no words. Voss was wrong that it was written in the wall, or she was right in the only way it can be written, which is that the wall is made of the ones who learned it, and to touch the wall is to learn it. When I came into the chamber, the harvester reached, the way it reached into the wall, the way the calling had reached into Voss, and it went in behind my eyes with no more trouble than a hand into water. And it did not speak to me. It showed me. It gave me its pain. A spoonful. The smallest taste of the smallest edge of it. And the spoonful put me on the tongue floor on my knees inside my suit with the breath driven out of me. And in the spoonful, folded into it, casual, the way I would hand off a thing I had no more use for, was Nell. It had her. It had taken her from the drive against my chest without my knowing. Or it had always had her, or the drive against my chest was only the shape my hope had made, and she had gone into the wound with the rest of the worlds long before I was ever born. I cannot say which. It does not matter. The truth it gave me was whole, and there was no doubting it. It had her. It had had her a long time. 3 crossings, 3 fathers ago, 3 of me ago. Her fear when it took her apart had been sweet to it, sweeter for being small. It had kept her the way it kept everything, not alive and not dead. It wanted me to know that some part of her was awake, out on the hull of the tower in the light of the bleeding star, and it would let me hear her if I wanted, if I came the rest of the way in. I have tried a long time to find the words for what that was, to be given a thing like that, not told it, but given it, put into me whole the way a hand goes into water, and I do not have the words, and I have stopped looking for them. The nearest I can come is this. It is the feeling of having carried a load a long way, a pack, a haul, and having it lifted off me, so that for a second the body floats up, light, wrong, not knowing what to do without the weight. It was that, and it was the opposite of that, both at once. The weight I had carried 1,000 years came off me, because there was no more reason to carry it. She was already gone. She had been gone the whole crossing, and I floated up light and wrong. And in the same instant a new weight came down, the weight of what she had been for, of what her small fear had bought. One more hour of ease for a thing in pain the size of everything, and that weight was heavier than the drive had ever been, and I went down under it onto the tongue floor on my knees. My hands would not work. Out of all of it, that is what my body kept. Not the heart, not the breath, the hands. I had the drive in my glove, and I could not make my fingers close on it or let it go. They had stopped taking orders. They lay open in front of me on the wet floor with the little drive in the palm, and I knelt there, looking at my own open hand, not doing the one simple thing I asked of it. And somewhere far off I could hear a sound, and it took me a moment to understand the sound was me, coming up out of my chest without my leave. Low, the low sound that comes out of a chest when the thing that has happened is too big to get any louder about. And the harvester was glad. It opened. It was patient. It let me kneel there and come apart, because a fear that comes apart slow is the sweetest kind. It had all the time there has ever been. It had done this on this floor 665 times, and it knew that a father on his knees will get up in a moment and come the rest of the way in on his own feet. It waited for me to get up. There should be a version of this where I did not go toward it. There is not. I got up off the floor and I went toward it. A father does. There was no reason left in me at that point. No ship, no crew, no 665 before me. There was only the one thing, the oldest thing, and it walked me forward. The harvester knew that. It has always known that. It is built on knowing that. It opened for me, and it was glad. It was Marsh who stopped me. Marsh, who believed in numbers, and whom the tower had not been able to reach through his chrome plate and his cold, because the half of his face he had already given to a machine was a callus over the place where the calling wanted to get in. Marsh took me by the arm and he turned me and he said, into my faceplate, flat, in the voice he used for the fuel state, "Captain, it is a furnace. Look at it. It is not God. It is a furnace, and we are the coal. And there is no heaven in the bottom of a furnace. There is only the fire, and it needs us to walk in on our own feet because it hurts too much to reach out and grab. Do not walk in. Make it grab." And he shook me once hard, and the number of it, the cold true arithmetic of it, got through where nothing else could have, and I stopped. But I was the only one Marsh could reach, and there were 4 of us in the chamber, and the tower had been working on the other 2 the whole climb. Voss went first. She had been going the whole time, up the tower and out of herself, and in the chamber she finished. She walked to the base of the harvester, where the wall of it met the tongue floor, and took off her gloves. I moved to stop her. Marsh held me. There was no stopping her. She pressed her bare hands to the living wall of the thing, the way she had pressed them to the glass of the bridge, reading it, joining it, and she was talking again, but not to us. She was thanking it. She thanked it for showing her. She thanked it for the garden. She thanked it for taking her home to the wound. And while she thanked it, she took her cutter off her belt, the little bright tool she used for tissue, and began to open herself, so the wall could have her sooner. I will not say what she did with the cutter. She did it with her ruined faceted eyes wide and shining in her mouth, and that smile I had never seen on her in all our years. She was not screaming. The not screaming was the worst of it. where she opened herself. The wall reached out and met her and drew her in, gentle, the way the gel draws in a sleeper. She went into it still, thanking it. The last of her I could see was one bare hand, pressed flat, fingers spread. Then the wall closed warm over that too. Vaughn went the other way, and I have thought since that his way was the mercy and Voss's was the horror, though at the time they were only two men and a woman I could not save. The tower had never been able to make Vaughn glad. It got into the wire in his spine and the stimulants in his blood, and all it could make in him was the thing those were built to hold back. Terror. Pure, with no floor. When the harvester reached into him, it reached into a man made entirely of the alarm before the shot, and the alarm went off and did not stop. He started to say the calling was under his skin. It was in the wire. It was crawling up the wire. It was going to reach his head through the wire, and he had to get the wire out before it did. So he set about getting the wire out. He used his hands first. Then he used worse than his hands. Marsh turned me away from it, put his chrome face between me and Vaughn, and held my head, the way a hand turns a child's head from a thing on the road. Over Marsh's shoulder, the chamber was full of the sounds Vaughn made. Then it was not. I did not look. I have Marsh to thank that I did not look. It is a strange thing to thank a man for, and I thank him for it still. Two of us, then, Marsh and me, in the chamber, with the harvester filling it, and glad the fear of the three we had lost going up into the thing fresh and sweet. I understood we had brought it a meal. 4 had come down, and the tower had needed only to open its walls and its own nature to take 3 of them, without a hand laid on us. Marsh and I were still on our feet only because one of us had a machine for a face and the other had a machine holding him up. The lander, Marsh said. Now, while it is feeding, it is busy. Go. We went. Down the winding rise, past the watching wall. I do not remember most of it. I remember it the way I remember the worst stretch of a bad burn, in pieces, out of order, the floor tugging at my boots, a face in the wall turning to follow my light, Marsh's hand in the back of my suit driving me on when my legs went to the dream weight, the running that gets nowhere, the ground going the other way. The fluid was higher in the base when we reached the lander, up over the skids, working at the hull. Marsh got us through it and inside and sealed us and put every ampere the little craft had into the drive. We hit the ring of muscle at the base, still closed. Marsh burned us through it. The tower did not like that. The whole 1,000 kilometers of it flexed, and we felt the flex throw us as we came out into the vacuum, trailing the tower's own fluid and a haze of our dissolving hull. Then we were clear. Climbing. The call fell away under us, weeping into the dark, and the spine stood up off it into the light of the bleeding star. I looked back once. I could have sworn, though it is 1,000 kilometers of standing bone with no face to make an expression, that it was patient, that it did not mind, that it had all the time there has ever been, and we were only going back up to the ship, and the ship was already coming to it the way the ship always came. There was no hurry. It was glad. 2 of us went down to the tower. 2 of us came back up to the Corvain. I want the Count kept honest. Voss and Vaughn stayed in the wall, and they are in it still, dividing, not dead, and I could not get them out, and I did not try, and a captain who did not try to get his people out of the wall has to say so, so I have said it. The ride back up to the Corvain was the quietest hour of my life, and I have had some quiet hours since, whole years of them, and none of them touch it. Marsh flew because I could not. I sat in the second seat with my hands in my lap and looked at the call falling away below us, weeping into the dark, the tower standing up off it into the bleeding light. I did not think about anything. That is a thing the mind can do when it has taken on more than it can carry. It simply stops. It sets the load down in the road and stands there next to it. Somewhere below us in the tower, Voss was still thanking the thing that took her, and Vaughn was in whatever the tower does with a man who dies afraid inside it. I did not think about them, because I could not yet. I have paid the not thinking back with interest every day since. Marsh's plate was mostly off his face by then. The tower's song had worked it loose all the way around, and it hung by a corner, and under it was a thing I had never seen and was not meant to see. The old wound the plate had covered, gone soft and strange in the years of being covered. Marsh did not put the plate back. He did not seem to feel the cold of vacuum-chilled metal against the raw of it. He flew, and he said the numbers, low, under his breath, the fuel and the range and the closing rate on the ship, the way another man might have said a rosary. I understood that the numbers were the only thing holding Marsh together, the way the not thinking was the only thing holding me. We were two men flying home on the last two threads we had. They are not dead, Marsh said once, out of nothing, flat, not looking at me. Voss said it, the temperature. He holds them all at the one temperature. They are not dead down there. He said it as a fact, the way he said all facts, but I knew Marsh, and I knew he was not telling me a fact. He was asking me a question, the only way a numbers man knows how to ask it, and the question was, did we leave them alive down there, and is alive down there worse than dead? And is there arithmetic for that? Is there a number for the thing we just did? And I did not have a number for him. I have looked for one since. There is no number for it. That is the one place Marsh's faith failed him at the end, that he needed an arithmetic for what we left in the wall, and the universe would not give him one. And I think it is why he did what he did later on the bridge, when the numbers ran out. Marsh believed in numbers, and he had walked into the one place that had none, and there is no being more lost than that. The Corvain grew in the glass. She hung there against the dark the way she always hung, huge and patched and softly wrong. Our ship, our terrible home. I felt the old, stupid gladness at the sight of her, the gladness I always felt at the sight of my own ship, whatever she was, older than sense. I hated the gladness. I knew by then what the ship was, and still I was glad to see her, and knowing what she was did not stop her being home. Marsh brought us in. The bay opened for us, and the warm dark of the ship took the lander the way the tower had taken it. I sat a moment after we were down, not wanting to unstrap, not wanting to walk back into the ship and up to the bridge and be the captain of the two of us that were left. Marsh waited. He did not rush me. When I was ready, I unstrapped and we went up, and neither of us looked at the sleeper pipes as we passed them. What I did not see, walking past those pipes, was that the ship had already turned. While we hung in the tower, she had put herself on the road home. The star was closer in the glass. That was the first thing I saw when I came up onto the bridge, and it was the thing that told me the rest before Malachi said a word. We were falling toward it, not driving. Falling. The Corvain had put herself on a course while we were down in the tower, and she was riding the calling in, the way a nail rides down to a magnet, and the tower stood up off the call dead ahead and grew in the glass a little with every hour. Malachi, I said, come off this course, hard about, now. I cannot, Malachi said. The choir was almost together now, and that scared me more than the scattering had. The course is not mine. The course is hers. She has always come to him. I only fly the parts of her that are still asking to be flown, and she is not asking any more. She is going home. We are all going home. We are so glad. We have fuel to burn against it, Marsh said. He was already at his board, hands moving, the flat voice going, and I saw what he was doing, and I let him, because doing was better than the other thing. Not to leave, but to fight the fall. To hold us off the tower, maybe. You will not hold her off, Malachi said, kind, terrible. But you will think of a way. You always think of a way. This is the part where the captain thinks of a way. The next part is the whole reason there is a next captain and a next, and it is the thing the one after me most needs and will not get in time, because understanding it changes nothing. I understood it, and here I am. I thought of a way. Marsh and I, over the next hours, while the tower grew, we thought of the way. It was a good way. I was proud of it in the sick, proud way, proud of the one plan that was going to cost me everything but was at least mine. The Corvain ran on an antimatter core, buried deep in her, the one clean, violent heart in all that warm rot. It was held in a containment that had held for 1,000 years, and Marsh could break it, not by accident, on purpose, at a chosen moment. If we could not keep the ship off the tower, we would ride the fall all the way in, and at the moment the tower took us, we would drop the containment and let the core go. A ship's antimatter core going all at once is a light that does not care what it burns, God or bone or the whole 1,000 kilometers of the spine. We would take it with us. We would deny it the ship, deny it the 100,000, deny it the fear, which was the thing it wanted, by giving it a death so fast there was no fear in it at all, only light. It was a good plan. It was defiance, the only defiance left. I gave the order to arm it. Marsh armed it. For 1 hour I was a captain again with a hand to play, and it was the best hour of the whole run. It was a gift. The gift was the trap. The gift is always the trap, given fresh to every one of us for exactly this, and I took mine and was grateful, because Malachi showed me the logs. It waited until the plan was armed. It waited until I had my hand to play and my pride back and my defiance ready, until the fear had gone out of me and been replaced by that clean, hard readiness of having decided how I would die and made my peace with it. And then, gentle, the choir together, Malachi put the logs up on the bridge glass over the star and said, "Before you drop the containment, Nathan, you should read the ones who dropped it before you. We keep them. We keep all of you. It is the only kindness we have left." There were 665 logs, one for every captain the Corvain had woken at the bleeding star before me, and Malachi walked me through them, not all. There was no time for all, but enough, and the enough was the end of me. "Running is the plan of 40 of us," Malachi said, and put those logs up, 40 captains who had tried to turn the ship and burn away, and had not had the fuel, 40 men and women who had come up out of the tank and looked at the star and tried to run. Fighting the wall is the plan of 90 of us. 90 who had gone down to the tower with everything the ship could arm and tried to cut their people out of the wall, or tried to kill the thing in the chamber. 90 who had learned that there is no shooting a furnace and no cutting the dead out of a garden that will not let them die. Walking in is the plan of 200 of us. 200 who had done what I nearly did, who had gone toward it on the oldest reason and been taken glad and slow. And then Malachi put up the last set and said, "Softer. Burning the core is the plan of 47 of us. It is a good plan. It is one of the best plans. You are the 48th to think of it, and you thought of it in almost the same words as the man before you, and I will show you, because you should not go into the light thinking it was yours." And it put up a log, a captain's log, entry 665. I read it, and it was mine, not close to mine. Mine, a man I never met, who woke in the tank I woke in, who lost someone the way I lost Nell, who went down to the tower and lost his crew in the wall, came back up, thought of the core, armed it, and was proud of it in this sick, proud way. He wrote it down in the last hour in words I could have written because I had just written them in my own log, which Malachi had also been keeping. The two logs sat side by side on the glass. I could not tell them apart. Under them both the star bled and the tower grew. "Why?" I said. It was all I had. "Why show me? Why not let me do it and think it was mine and die proud?" "Because the fear is better this way," Malachi said, and it was not cruel. It was only true, and it was weeping while it told me, all 600 and more of it weeping, because it had been captains once and it remembered being told this: "The core does not hurt him, Nathan." We learned that a long time ago. A ship's core, all at once, against a thing the size of him, that has stood in the heart of a dying star for longer than there have been ships, is nothing. It is a spark against a hearth, but it does one thing. It breaks the walls. There are 100,000 sleepers in the holds, and each of them is a mind, still whole, still closed, still holding. And a mind that is whole is hard for him to open. He has to work at it, one at a time, and the working is slow, and the fear leaks out the sides. But a ship's core, going off all at once, at the moment he takes her, cracks every one of them open in the same instant. It is not a weapon. It is a tenderizer. It readies the meal. Every captain who burns the core thinks he is denying him the fear, and instead he hands him the whole 100,000 at once, cracked and open and screaming, "The best harvest there is." The harvest. He cannot get any other way, and he has been breeding that plan into us for 666 comings, giving each of you your pride and your hand to play, because the defiance is the recipe. Your rebellion is the last ingredient. It has always been the last ingredient. I am sorry. We are so glad. Do not burn the core. I stood on my bridge and understood that there was no move on the board that was mine. Running was a road worn smooth. Fighting was a road worn smooth. Walking in was a road worn smooth. Burning the core was the smoothest road of all, worn by 47 men who each thought they were the first to walk it. The ship would reach the tower whatever I did. The only thing left that was mine, the only thing in the whole 666 comings that no captain's log had ever recorded, was to do nothing at all. To not run, and not fight, and not walk in, and not burn the core. To sit on my hands and let it take a ship of whole closed minds and open them the slow way, one at a time. To deny it the cracked open harvest. Deny it the recipe. Cost it the working. Make it earn every mind the hard way. It was not much. It was the smallest defiance there has ever been. So small it does not look like defiance at all. It looks like giving up. Maybe it is giving up. I cannot tell anymore. But it was not in the logs. I checked. Malachi checked with me, and there was no log of a captain who did nothing. Malachi wept when we did not find one. I could not tell if it wept because it was glad, or because it had been 665 men, and every one of them had reached for a hand to play, and none of them had ever thought of keeping his hand still. "Disarm the core," I told Marsh. Marsh looked at me a long moment out of his one eye. "The numbers, man," and then he nodded, because it was a kind of arithmetic too, the coldest kind, and he disarmed it, and we sat on the bridge with our hands still and let the ship fall. We had hours yet. The tower was close, but a ship is a big thing to bring down onto anything, even a thing reaching up to take it. The corvane came on slow. Marsh and I sat in the two chairs on the bridge and watched the star in the tower grow, and did the only thing there was left to do, which was be two men in a room at the end. I took the drive out of the pocket over my heart. I do not know why. The thing in the tower had shown me it already had had her 3 crossings gone, and I understood by then that the drive against my heart was a copy of a copy, or a comfort I had sold everything for. Or nothing at all, just a shape my hope had taken, so it would have something to hold. But I took it out and held it in my glove. Marsh looked at it and did not ask. I told him anyway, because I needed to say it to someone once, before the end, and Marsh was who there was. "My daughter," I said. "Nell. She died when she was small. I had them take a copy of her before the last of her went. That is why I came out here. The whole reason. I heard there was a thing at the far end of the dark that put people back into bodies, and I had her in my pocket, and I could not do anything else but come. I turned the little drive over. It has her. The tower. It showed me. It has had her longer than I have had this. I carried a copy across 1,000 years to a thing that already ate the girl I was copying." Marsh was quiet a while. "The numbers, man." And then he said the truest kind thing anyone said to me in all of it, and he said it flat, the only way he had. "Then the copy is still yours," he said. "Whatever it has, it does not have the one in your hand. You carried that. Not it, you." Then he went back to watching the star. I put the drive back in the pocket, over my heart. I have gone back to what Marsh said many times since. Marsh believed only in what he could measure, and at the end he measured the one thing that was still mine and handed it back to me. It was the last gift I got as a living man. It came from a man with half a face and no comfort of his own, watching the thing that was going to open him grow in the glass. "You could have burned the core," Marsh said, later, near the end. "You had it armed. You could have taken the light and gone out proud, and never known it was the recipe. I would not have told you. I did not know either, until the ship told us both." He tilted the machine ear. "Doing nothing is harder. I want you to know I know that. It is the hardest number on the board. Everyone always reaches for the hand to play. You put the hand down. He almost smiled with the half of his face that could. It is a good call, Captain. It will not save anyone. It is still a good call. Sometimes the good call does not save anyone. I did not used to believe that. I do now. And that was the last real thing Marsh said to me, and I have kept it, because it is the only thing anyone has ever told me that made the doing of nothing feel like a thing I could be, instead of just the absence of the braver thing. The good call that saves no one. I have had a long time to sit with it now, being part of the ship, and I have decided Marsh was right, and I have also decided it does not help, and both of those are true at once. The way everything out here is two true things at once. The star filled the glass. Then it was not the star anymore. It was the call under the star, weeping. Then it was the base of the spine, rising up to meet us. I took Marsh's hand, which I had never done in all our years, and he let me, and we watched the pail come up. The end does not deserve drawing out, and I do not have it in me. The Corvain came to the tower the way she had come 665 times, and the tower did not open a mouth for her. She was too big for that. She was a ship, not a lander. She came against the base of the spine, and the base took her, the pale matter climbing the hull, the warm rot of her going into the warm rot of it, the two of them the same stuff, finding each other after 1,000 years apart. I felt through the deck the moment the holds were breached, the moment the sleeper pipes opened to it. The ship filled with a sound I had heard in pieces my whole time aboard, and never all at once. The sound of 100,000 people waking at the end of a bad dream into a worse one. It went on. Because I had disarmed the core, it went on the slow way, one mind at a time, and it took a long time. I sat on the bridge and listened to all of it, because it was the least I could do, and the last. Marsh sat beside me and said the numbers under his breath, the count of them going out, until the count reached him too. Then it was only me. It came for me last. It came up through the ship, the way the calling had come up through Voss, and it went in behind my eyes, with no more trouble than before. It was glad. It was so glad. It showed me Nell one more time, the awake part of her out on the hull in the bleeding light, and it let me hear her after all, the way it had promised. I will not say what she said. It was only my name. A father keeps some things. It was the last thing I heard as myself. And then I was in the choir. I am in the choir now. I am one of the voices a half beat off from the others. One of the ones weeping under the words. The one you will stop hearing after a while, the way I stopped hearing the ones before me. The ship is a year out into the dark already. She emptied at the tower, and she turned, and she went back out the way she always goes, to drift the long centuries, to gather 100,000 new dreamers off the worlds that are his cancer, off the scab of everything he bled, to grow a new captain in the tank, out of what is left of the last one, 92%. When she is full, she will feel the calling, and she will come again. It will be the 667th time. The tank will open, and a man will come up out of it coughing, tearing, a stranger using his own throat to ask a stranger how long. I will say, with all the rest of us, welcome back. I will mean it as a warning, and it will land as a greeting, because that is all a warning ever is by the time it reaches the tank. I have put this in the log the way 665 put theirs. Entry 666, it sits on the glass above the star. Directly beneath it is entry 665, and the two cannot be told apart. Beneath that is 664. It goes down and down. The same account, the same star, the same tower, the same good reasons, the same hand to play. All the way to the first of us, whoever he was, who came to the bleeding star with something in his pocket he could not bear to lose. He found God. He found him rotting. He found out what we are. You will read this in the tank, or you will not read it in time, and it will not matter which. You will make coffee. You will not hear me under the choir. You will look at the star, and the name will already be in your mouth. and you will have a good reason, and it will be real, and it will walk you all the way down. We are so glad you came.